Managing Director of Transparent RX. The title of the webinar you can see there on your screen. If for some reason you cannot see it, please let me know and we'll see what we can do about it. But before I get into the content for today, I want to acknowledge just a few people here. We've got the big boys and girls with us here today. No surprise, it's the beginning of the year. The last quarter is tough on everyone. And now people get into learning mode, preparation for 2021. So Burke, I see you. Denise, I see you. John, I see you. Todd, I see you. Thank you for joining me today. And so let me real quick, before I dive in, just give you a quick kind of background about myself. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, did some homework before you hopped on here today. You know, who is this guy? Real quick, I earned my stripes on the pharmaceutical side with Eli Lilly. I owned a mail order pharmacy. Today, I own the first pure and what I believe still to be the only fiduciary model PBM. But today is not about that. Today is about you and helping you improve the relationships that you have with PBMs beyond a functional role. And so I was talking with my team yesterday, and I used the word during meetings, no fluff today. I said, let's just make it a no fluff week, right? So today is no fluff Tuesday. I am going to give it to you straight. I got no reason to hide anything. And I hope that from your research and what I've just shared with you up to this point, I kind of know what I'm talking about. The challenge is getting folks who have been doing this for 1 to 2 decades to unlearn what they think they know and to relearn a better way and how to do business and manage your pharmacy benefits. If you have any questions, there are 2 ways to get those questions to me. You can send them via chat, which I welcome them. If we have a break in the action before I get to the conclusion, I'll try and answer some of those questions. You can also use the raised hand feature that is on your control panel that you see here, at which point I will unmute you, and then you will have the floor for any questions that you want to pose, or you could say, Tyrone, you're full of it. And let's have a conversation, a back and forth. We all win when that happens. All right. So what's the goal today? I want you to know how PBMs make money. I want you to feel something other than indifference. If there's no emotion, there's no action. And the action I want you to take is to start to understand how PBMs are making money. Whenever we approach or a prospect, a potential new client approaches us about solving their pricing problem, our solution isn't necessarily just talking about transparency, better discounts off of AWP, bigger rebate, minimum rebate guarantees. It is actually to eliminate information asymmetry, because PBMs intentionally make it difficult to determine how much money that they're making. That's the whole point here. That you can talk about NADAC and AWP minus ASP and all those things all you want. At the end of the day, what matters most, and I'm going to talk about that here when we get to the end, is how much money is the PBM keeping. And so if we're trying to eliminate information asymmetry, what does information symmetry look like? What does information success look like? Here's the first really good insight I'm going to give you. As a fiduciary model PBM, when we pay rebates to our clients, in conjunction with those rebates, they get a receipt. And that receipt, industry wide, is referred to as a remittance report. And in that receipt is the claim level detail of every drug that was eligible to receive a rebate and was paid a rebate. If you are not getting this level of detail and you believe you're in a pass-through or transparent arrangement, or your client is in a pass-through or transparent arrangement with a PBM, you might want to rethink that. You might want to rethink that. And so while the information here has been eliminated, that's intentional. It's private, it's confidential information, right? So when our clients get these reports, everything's populated. But you can see here what's being paid on those claims. There's a reason PBMs aren't volunteering this information. There's a reason when you bang your fist on the desk and you demand it, that they are hesitant to give it up. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit as well. So that leads me to the status quo. Typically, but not always, but typically, plan sponsors, self-funded employers enter into an agreement with a PBM that calls for an artificially too low PBM administrative fee. Because that administrative fee is artificially too low, that essentially gives the PBM the green light to augment that artificially too low admin fee in the back end. That admin fee, folks, I'm not just talking about the per claim fee that you might pay on the pharmacy side. I'm also talking about when you forego rebates for an admin fee credit on your medical, on your administrative services. It's the same game, just a different name. This is a second source of that same information on the previous slide. And I remember back in 2002, that is when I started my career in the pharmaceutical industry with Eli Lilly. Back then, it was the small molecule brand drugs. That's how PBMs were making their money. You got smarter. PBMs through a process called ballooning shifted that lost revenue. When you got smarter and you cut off that leaky faucet, the PBMs shifted that lost revenue. Remember mandatory mail order? Remember that? And then you got wise to that. And then the PBMs shifted that lost revenue again. Now they've shifted it to specialty drug rebates. I've seen some of these contracts. Some of these contracts are so opaque. They're so lopsided and geared toward the benefit of the PBM who doesn't offer enough value to take all of the rebate dollars from specialty drugs. PBM services. You sit around the table, you sit around the water cooler with people who have owned PBMs, executives at the highest level within PBMs, and they will tell you, our services have been commoditized. Why is a PBM keeping a $5,000 rebate, a $10,000 rebate on a specialty drug? Come on. And so now if we move this out and consider the source here, right? So I just, listen, I'm not just making stuff up here, right? And so if we move this out, this is starting to go down a little bit if we're just talking about the retail side, right? But you move this out here, and then you got MBM MBDCs, medical benefit drug claims. It's the wild, wild west right now. The drugs being dispensed on the medical side, if you compile them on the retail side, the retail pharmacy side, it's going to come out to right around 25% of total drug spend, just on the medical side. And right now, the PBMs are having a free for all because it's not really being addressed. The rebates, formularies on the medical side, yes, there are drug formularies on the medical side not being addressed. And the cost, especially. And so, listen, I'm not here to bash PBMs. I believe PBMs offer a very, very valuable service. But my issue are the additional revenues to non-fiduciary PBMs, which make up not just the additional, but the hidden revenues, which make up the bulk of their profits. And so it's important that we understand the business model. Do you know, this is a little anecdote. Do you know there are some very, very smart people on the broker side, on the plan sponsor side, the consultant side, who have been doing this for a long time and are just now learning or have yet to learn that unless a PBM owns a mail order or a specialty pharmacy, we never take control of the product. We never have inventory, right? So let me start with the contractual relationship. PBMs contract with pharmacies in order to have sites from which prescriptions can be dispensed to our plan participants. And those pharmacies are usually, you go to the chains, right? There's a big chunk there. You go through PSAOs, which are essentially buying groups for pharmacies. Pharmacies contract with the PSAOs. The PSAOs negotiate with PBMs on reimbursements. So whatever the PSAO, the Pharmacy Services Administrative Organization, whatever contracts we establish with them, if a pharmacy, primarily say an independent, is contracted with a PSAO, then they get the deal that the PSAO negotiated. And then obviously we have to have clients in order to provide these services too. Third-party payers, health plans, self-funded employers, municipalities, unions, state government, federal government, coalitions, right? Schools, public schools. It's a fairly exhaustive list. Now, in terms of the financial flow, we reimburse pharmacies when they dispense a prescription to one of our plan participants. And then we bill our clients for the cost of the drug plus a service fee, like an administrative fee, right? But this is where the problems begin. PBMs have learned that they can leverage your purchasing power, your client's purchasing power, to their financial advantage because you aren't as sophisticated as they are in this space. Instead of doing good, knowing that you know less about how the system works, the PBM takes advantage of it. That's why I go back to information asymmetry as being the problem, because if you had the information, just as important, if you had the ability to interpret the information that you do have, this stops. The self-dealing stops. So the problem here is really threefold, not just two. The first one, the inflow of cash in the form of rebates, the intent is to get to lowest net cost for the drug. If you believe those two different slides that I showed you from Dr. Abrams and then the previous one, which is from the Pharmacy Benefit Management Institute, if you believe those two sources, then half the profits PBMs are generating are coming from the manufacturer. Half of the profits are coming from the manufacturer. That means your drug costs are higher because the PBM is siphoning off too large of a share of those dollars. The second problem, and I'm going to elaborate on this, is the outflow of cash in terms of cost of goods, reimbursement to the PBM for the drugs that were dispensed and what the PBM reimbursed to the pharmacy is too high. This is too low. Reimbursement, let me clear this off. And see, whenever I have to do this and stop talking, I lose my flow. It takes me a little bit to get my flow back. So bear with me. So the second problem is the inflow of cash is too high. I'm sorry, the inflow is too high, is too low, and the outflow in terms of reimbursement is too high. The third problem, and I'm going to elaborate on the outflow in terms of reimbursement for the product, the prescription drugs. I'm going to elaborate on that here in a second. But the third problem is it's staring you right in the face. This is an extremely complicated system. And a lot of money flows through it. You know where that money's coming from? Right here. You are funding 90% of it. Patients are funding the other 10% of it. Yet you know the least about how it works. In a capitalistic society, and I love it. I love capitalism. When you're at the table with someone who has much more knowledge than you do, and you've got the checkbook, what do you think is going to happen? The second problem, in terms of reimbursement for the prescription drugs, the outflow of cash, that's referred to as a spread. So let's be clear. Let's clear this up once and for all. A spread is not a billing error. A spread is intentional. A spread is the difference between what a PBM reimburses a pharmacy, and what it bills the third-party payer for that same drug, the exact same drug. When there is a difference, and trust me, if there is, it is going to be on the high side to the third-party payer. The third-party payer is going to pay more than what the PBM paid to reimburse the pharmacy. That is what creates the spread. And in 2021, can you believe it? We're in 2021 already. You cannot take a PBM's word, because many times, depending on how large the PBM is, and sometimes even the smaller ones like mine, the people telling you that they don't engage in spread pricing have got no clue. They're not part of that discussion. They're repeating what they've been told or what they believe to be true. If you don't know, you need two things to know if a spread is taking place. This might be the second. I'm sure I've given other insights between the first one and now, but this is the second big insight I'm sharing. You need two things to know whether or not a spread is taking place. You need to know what your costs are. That's simple enough, or maybe not. Or if you get your claims data and that claims data doesn't require any elbow grease to reconcile, that's the first thing that you need. You need clean claims data for every drug that you pay for on a regular basis. You shouldn't have to fight for that. You shouldn't enter into a contract where you can't get what? That information. See, I'm back to information asymmetry again. There's a reason why some PBMs make it difficult, or they want to charge you for your own data. You need two things. You need what you paid, and then you need to know what the pharmacy was reimbursed. A PBM who is claiming to be transparent or pass-through should provide you with what's called a 835 remittance. Remember that remittance report I showed you for rebates? There's a report for claims adjudication too, and it's called an 835. And it details what the PBM paid the pharmacy for the drug. If your PBM claims to be transparent or pass-through, you should be able to audit enough of those reports to determine whether or not you're paying a spread. Especially if the PBM is saying that you're not paying a spread. But it doesn't matter whether you are, you still want access to that data. When we have company lunches and things like that, and our team, buys lunch and I want the receipt. I want the receipt. When your employees and your team and you, even yourself, you travel, you put it on the company dollar, you put it on the company credit card, they want receipts. Why is it that you don't ask for receipts for rebates and claims transactions? I'm not talking about your claims file. I'm talking about that and what the PBM paid the pharmacy. Spreads typically take place on generic drugs, right? Let me back up. They happen on brand drugs, but the margins are much, much higher on the generics because they're multi-source. There's more than one company making that drug, right? So prices are lower than compared to the brand equivalent. And so generic drugs have two prices. The AWP, which is artificially inflated, no one pays it. It's just a sticker price. And then you have the MAC price, which is closer to the actual acquisition cost than is the AWP, much closer, but it too is still higher than the actual acquisition cost. This is information I post on my blog. I try to do it every Tuesday. I'm supposed to post one today. No, every Thursday I do it. Okay, today's Tuesday. Every Thursday I do it. Not every Tuesday, every Thursday. On Tuesdays, I got my Tuesday tip of the week. Blog.transparentrx. I haven't posted that today. I got to catch up. But what we do is share with you some popular drugs in terms of their utilization and their AWP prices and their actual acquisition costs. I talked to you about spreads, how a spread manifests. Let me show you here real quickly. Let's compare AWP and MAC really quickly. All right, so levothyroxine. right? For hypothyroidism, it's a thorn in my side. Everyone wants Synthroid. It's just a thorn on my side, but which is more costly to the plan, right? But the AWP is 561, right here. But let's round. So let's go with 560. Let's assume you negotiate with a PBM a discount off of AWP of 85%, right? A discount off of AWP of 85%. That's going to mean to you, to your client, that the discount is 400, and let's round, $75. Okay? That leaves then a cost for this particular drug to the plan of $85. That's with an 85% discount. Let's call it a generic effective rate, as a matter of fact. So it's a clean 85%, no game playing. Take a look at what the pharmacy paid for this product. $4. $4. Now, if this drug were not on the PBM's MAC list, and mind you, it doesn't take for a PBM to move, a large quantity of product off the MAC list. If the drug is not on, the MAC list, its cost is more than likely going to be based upon AWP minus, right? It doesn't take a PBM to move a large quantity of products off the MAC list. Remember, we control the MAC list, the products that are on that MAC list, and what the costs are on that MAC list for those listed drugs, those MAC'd, MAC apostrophe D drugs. So if a PBM moves it off the MAC list, then your cost is going to be AWP minus. You got no idea. You got no idea. Right? And so the cost to the plan is $85. The cost to the pharmacy is $4 to put the product on the shelf. The PBM could give the pharmacy 100% markup, which I can tell you. One of the reasons I moved from pharmacy, owning a mail order pharmacy licensed in all 50 states, was because of the reimbursements coming back from PBMs that sometimes were lower than our cost. And so let's consider the dispensing fee a wash. So now you've got PBM pays out of its bank account $8, right? That essentially leaves the PBM with a profit of $77. That's a spread. That is a spread, folks. You know what you're going to pay. That should be easy enough. But the key is, what is the PBM reimbursing the pharmacy for that same drug? If the product is on the MAC list, let's say that the product is on the MAC list for $15. The out-of-pocket for the PBM doesn't change, right? The out-of-pocket for the PBM doesn't change. It's still $8. So we move that $8 here. The spread is now $7. The state of Ohio, and stay with me here. I'm doing pretty good in terms of time. The state of Ohio, just a couple years ago. And this is not secondhand information, what I'm sharing with you. Okay, it's firsthand. Take that however you want. Decided it was going to hire a consultant to audit its claims, but it used a different approach this time. Instead of auditing against contract guarantees, the state of Ohio was more interested in how much money the PBM made off of their deal. And if you look here, the director of the Department of Health Transformation, Greg, says when they discovered almost $250 million in 1 year, just in spreads, they hadn't even looked at rebates. Just in spreads, they started looking at what the PBMs were reimbursing the pharmacies. How does a state wait this long to start? Remember in the very beginning, I told you the hard part is people doing this for 2 decades, believing they know enough about the game not to become a victim, and having to unlearn and then relearn a different path. And what Greg says, what we're saying, we're not saying it's too high or too low. He's talking about that number there. What he's saying is it's information. There we go again. There we go again. That word, information, that we've never had before. And if he were sitting with you over the dinner table, talking one-to-one in confidence, he would tell you it's information we never asked for before. It's information we never demanded before. That's the missing piece. It was always there. Misleading contract language. The contract is king. It is true in the PBM industry. It is not the only thing. But in terms of addressing the pricing problem, it is the most important thing, hands down. Hands down. I'm not saying that nothing else isn't important. Of course, plan design is important. Of course it is. I touched on MAC list. Contract language leads the reasonable person to believe there's only one MAC list. PBMs can have multiple MAC lists. In fact, the larger PBMs have 40 or more MAC lists. The issue with that is the employer's MAC list will be less comprehensive, meaning your MAC list will have less drugs on it than the PBM's MAC list. So if your cost is based on what? AWP minus instead of the MAC, MAC apostrophe D price, and the pharmacies is based on MAC, I just showed you what happens in the difference in the pricing. If it is on the MAC price list, then the employer's prices can be higher than the MAC prices paid to the pharmacy. If there's a difference in the price, it is going to be that the plan sponsor, the third party payer, pays more than what the PBM pays the pharmacy or reimburses the pharmacy. In the pharmacy reimbursement distribution system slide, that kind of business model there, remember, I talked about the inflow of cash being too low. You saw the rebate listed there. It was formulary rebate. I see it too many times where in the contract language, the other rebates or revenue coming from the manufacturer isn't addressed. Or there could be more than one being addressed, but then there's one that's being left out. And then what do you think the PBM can do then? It could ensure that more of the dollars coming back for rebates are labeled or renamed to fit the rebate that you didn't address in the contract language. The administrative fee rebate there is not the same as the administrative fee you might pay for claims adjudication services. It's got nothing to do with that. It just looks like it does. This is just the PBMs sitting down at the table with the manufacturer. It's driven by the PBMs. Manufacturers would prefer not to have to pay rebates, but they have to pay rebates to get the products onto our formularies. And by the way, listen, rebates are not, it's like people say money is evil. No, it's not. It's the people who are evil. When they use money in a bad way. Money doesn't have a brain or emotions. Right? So it's the PBM sitting down with the drug maker, and they're driving this entire thing. You know, we agree on a bucket, we agree on a number for the drug, and then that number gets broken down into how it's going to be named. And that's driven by the PBMs. But if you're not trying to hide that cash flow from your client, it doesn't matter. You just agree on the number, and then your clients get whatever's, you know, based upon their utilization, they get that money. That's it. You may have heard about this. This came out just maybe 2 years ago, maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. But remember, you know, when stuff happens on the medical side or lawsuits, it usually happens a couple years after the information is gathered. So these are the invoice dates for these drugs. Express Scripts, a PBM, sued a specialty drug manufacturer because they didn't pay rebates Express Scripts believed that they were owed. Express Scripts was owed the money. There's no question about it. Okay, that information is public information. You can go out online and look it up. But here's what I just want to show you. This is just one drug from one kind of small biologic manufacturer. Just one drug, specialty drug manufacturer. The formulary rebates are here. Here are the administrative fees, which are rebates as well. They dwarf the formulary rebates. Here are more rebates, right? We're adding in price protection rebates. As you can see, this is the same two companies, same lawsuit. The price protection rebates dwarf both the formulary and the administrative fee rebates. Price protection rebates are simply this. If a drug maker increases the price above a certain threshold and within a short time frame, then that rebate owed to the PBM is increased to coincide with that price increase. And so now plan sponsors and their consultants are getting wise to this. It really, all PBMs do is just add, okay, you get price protection rebates, but then we get product discounts. It's a rebate. It's a rebate, just being renamed, same thing. So if a PBM writes in its contract, you're going to get 4 rebates, we're going to get 5. No, you get all 5. Outcomes rebates, been going on now for over a decade. Been going on now for over a decade. If a product doesn't achieve a certain efficacy level, or there's a patient has a side effect or is non-adherent, then that agreement between the PBM and the drug maker may call for a rebate. It's been going on for a decade. It was slow to take off. The software hadn't caught up, but now the software is caught up. It can track these metrics now. And so the bottom line here is this. Like the state of Ohio, let me back up. The number one metric in evaluating a PBM's proposal or a PBM's performance is how much it's being paid. Now, just think about this for a second. As a PBM, when we go to PSAOs and we go to pharmacy chains and we go to drug manufacturers, we negotiate deals with them in terms of what we'll pay for the drugs and what we're asking in terms of a rebate to get the net cost down. Once those deals are done, they're static. They don't change until those contracts come back up for renewal. 3, 5, 10-year deals somewhere in there. They're set in stone. We don't go back to the drug maker or to the PSAO or the chain pharmacy and say, hey, we're going to lose this client unless you give us a better deal. That's not the way it works. So if you believe me when I say that, what you're really negotiating for, AWP minus, MAC, usual and customary, member cost share, those are significant metrics, but they can also be distractions. What you're ultimately trying to negotiate for is how much money you're going to allow the PBM to keep. Because the money you leave on the table is money they keep in their bank account. And so, like the state of Ohio, what you have to do is determine what this number is. What are you paying the PBM for the service that it was hired to perform? And then you have to decide for yourself if it's too high or if it's too low. Is that too much to ask? When I hire a plumber, I don't know what their profit margins are. Maybe I don't care. When I go to the grocery store and buy groceries, I don't know what their profit margins are, but I get a receipt. I know what I paid you. This is it's so ingenious. You could overpay and almost have to respect the PBMs who engage in this self-dealing practices. I mean, it is set up to take advantage of those from a sophistication standpoint who are not on the same playing field with the PBMs. It is set up for you to overpay. The significance of this number here, what the PBM ultimately keeps in its bank account, is that that number is hidden here. The PBM's management fee is what it charges you for the services it was hired to perform. Don't be swayed by all the sexy talk about the clinical programs and all this, all this stuff. It starts with transparency. It starts with eliminating information asymmetry. It starts there. And if a PBM isn't willing to offer at a minimum radical transparency, then it should end there. The PBM's management fee, this might be the fifth big insight today. The PBM's management fee, we call it earnings after cash disbursements. What is the PBM earning after the money leaves their bank account? I'm talking specifically just for PBM related services. I'm not talking about real estate and all that kind of stuff. Everything in green lands in the PBM's bank account at some point. Everything in green lands in the PBM's bank account. An example of revenue or money that leaves the PBM's bank account is, go back to the reimbursement and distribution system. A reimbursement to a pharmacy for a drug that it dispensed to a PBM's plan participant. A share, remember just the formulary rebates are getting passed back, but you now know there's at least 5 different names. There's more than that, but you now know at least, I think, 4 or 5. Right? So a PBM passes back a share of the manufacturer revenue or the rebates, but then it holds on to some of it as well. That's a cash disbursement. Whatever is left over is what the PBM is keeping in its bank account. That's a competitive advantage. If you're a broker, if you're a PBM consultant, if you can bring this to the table and none of your competitors are. And none of your competitors are. Next time I'm gonna have my webcam on next time, I think. I got to start doing these so you can see me. But I don't stand in front of the laptop. Anyway, I move around a lot. But I want you to understand how important this formula is. All right. And actually, I've updated this for, and here's the reason I'm showing you this. I want you to see how fast it could happen. This is not about clinical programs being implemented. This is about information success, information symmetry, and a PBM being radically transparent. Nothing more, nothing less. There are no manufacturer programs involved with this, nothing. First 6 months, we brought this client on January 1st through June. I just did this for Q3 through September. And I think we're down to 56% savings. And we're just getting started. It's a new client. We're just getting started. This is what happens when the PBM says, we're just going to charge you a flat fee. Per claim, PEPM, whatever it is, a flat fee. I'm wrapping up here. Stay with me. All right. CVS, the CEO, 2018, in an earnings call. It's public information. This is not my slide. It's out on the internet. Public information. Here's what he said. And let me put this here in layman's terms for you. When he says we underwrite contracts overall level profitability, many levers available to pull depending on the preferences of the client. I've already said that at least twice today. But here's how I said it. The PBM is going to make as much money as it possibly can if it is not radically transparent or fiduciary in its business model. And how much money that PBM is going to make is ultimately going to depend on how sophisticated or unsophisticated their clients might be. He talked about contracts. He used the word contracts. You could say underwrite, but you could also say write. We write contracts to overall level of profitability. No matter what they tell you, the contract will tell you how the PBM is going to make money and whether or not it is going to be in a method, whether it's disclosed or undisclosed. It is the undisclosed revenue you've got to uncover. The new path in doing business with PBMs says this. And I'm not suggesting this is the only way. If you agree to let a PBM make money from the manufacturer revenue, or in other words, rebates, or if you agree to let the PBM make money from spreads, then you darn well better know how much money it amounts to. That's the key here. I'm not saying necessarily that you don't allow the PBMs to do that if that's how, maybe you need more cash up front to finance your pharmacy benefit, whatever it is. But you darn well better know with 100% certainty, maybe not that high, maybe 90%, 95, how much money the PBM is making from spreads or the manufacturer. But the easiest way is when the PBM makes a reasonable admin fee starting at $6 per claim and then going up from there. You could factor that out to a PEPM, PMPM. It doesn't matter as long as the PBM isn't charging you for reversals, or rejections on paid claims. The trade-off now is that the PBM contractually forgoes to making money any other way. When you do that, you've got almost an overnight drop in what you pay for the pharmacy benefit. I've talked about information, interpreting information asymmetry a lot today. Let me make it personal as I close out here. Whenever I go to a car dealer, I know walking in the door I need a repair. There's a good chance I'm going to overpay because I know nothing about cars. I know nothing about cars. But when I walk in with my chest out, my voice loud and confident. But inside, I know I got no shot. I got no shot. So I want to make them believe that I know what I'm talking about when they offer me a service and I say, I don't need that. You know what happens? I usually deny a service that I shouldn't have denied, and I get things done that I shouldn't have got done. or worse, I pissed them off. And I'm pretty sure, because they'll ask questions, they'll know it. And see, I see this a lot in the PBM industry. People will read something and they'll sit with the PBM or their broker and they'll spout out something, and you can tell they read a blog or something, but they don't know exactly what they're talking about. They have an idea into a PBM that is blood in the water. And so these car repairmen, they'll ask questions, they'll say things, and then they know. Blood in the water. No matter how much I beat my hand on the table, at some point they learn this guy doesn't know the difference between a tire rod and a gasket. It boils down to information. It boils down to knowledge. Listen, I'm wrapping up here. Something exciting coming out later in the year. We're starting an institute, nonprofit institute, just based around education and research in the PBM industry. It is based on this certification, this designation here. It is the first and only kind in the nation, if not the world, to be backed by a major university. I teach the course and I teach all 8 modules just like you heard today. Truth and nothing less. That's my time here today, folks. So listen, if you have any questions, feel free to send them through. I'm going to stick around for just a couple minutes. Got to make sure I stop this recording. You will get a link to this recording tomorrow morning. So be on